replace his name with my name on the minutes for attendees if it makes any difference, please. So I'm Janelle Ackley, president here, PSC 1117.
Thank you, Janelle.
Sure.
Great. Okay, so just want to take a look again. The goals for the meeting really are we're down to two main objectives for this meeting. One, to do a little more work around the primary considerations list, continue shaping that. You know, it says establish primary considerations list. We might not get to an official establishment of them, but we're going to continue shaping them. And then secondly, we're going to look at introducing options for consideration and gathering some initial feedback. And again, this is just a first swing at this. We have 3 more meetings after this one. This is not going to be accomplished in a day. The amount of work to be done in terms of getting any plan to the point where we can deliver it in a strong way for our students come September is huge. And so we're going to do this in iterative steps where we'll show some options and then work on them some more and then come back and get feedback from you. And just to remind you, the purpose of this committee is to be able to have a conduit for communication with your community, and also to vet ideas and to stay at the 10,000 foot and above level to bring up ideas that we may be missing in our planning, to offer insights, to bring different perspectives, to make certain that as many voices in our community are heard. But again, it is not to get into the weeds of the details of the planning, because it would just be impossible for us to do that unless we were going to meet every day for the next 3 weeks. So just try to remember that. And I know there is an inclination, I feel it oftentimes too, and I'm not even a member of your community, but you know, there's an inclination to want to bring in something that gets down at the very detail level. But it is better for all of us if we do not. Again, if there's something that goes unsaid or you think is an important thing for us to be considering, be sure to send that in the reflection documents that's online, or to send emails to myself or Justin or Kim, Aaron, or all of us to make certain that that information gets through, because your voice is important, but for the effectiveness of the meeting, we want to stay focused on what our charge is. And with that, I'll just open it up to Dr. Blasco for any additional comments he'd like to make before we get started.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for being here. We had to kind of go out on a little bit of a limb here on July 1st. It was remarkable today. There was a couple of times that I just thought, where did June go with high school graduations and everything that we had closing up the school year, and just kind of the crazy hectic couple of months that was continuous learning 1.0 here in Monroe School District and serving the needs of our kids. I just appreciate again, and I just want to emphasize some of Spencer's words, that while we are kind of continuing down this funnel of working through these things, a lot of steps yet remain. We've had some conversations with our central office staff, our building staff. We know that we're going to have conversations with our union partners in working through the details of how to make whatever it is we initially come up with work with the contracts that we have in place, or potentially having to rebargain some of that language that exists in the contract in order to make those things work. We understand that that's a step. And I think it's important for those of you in our community as well to understand that, you know, we do have standing contracts that are very much aligned to normal school. I resisted. I was trying to resist that temptation. I'm afraid this might be our new normal for a while. And so there's a couple of steps that we'll have to take with all of our partners in really serving the students. I really appreciated reflecting on really the work that's taken place up into this point. I'm really impressed with some of the feedback that's coming back that you're gathering outside of the committee meetings. Very important. I met with our communications team today, and we started to kind of mold survey options to be able to have a survey happen between now and the next meeting. And so we know that we're going to be collecting some more data and information that we'll be able to move through. But just wanted, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking this time out. We really, really value your voice. We value your opinions. It is really helping to shape our thinking and quite frankly, create questions in our mind that we wouldn't have come to as just kind of being so close to the trees. You've really helped us to kind of take a step back and to really think more critically about this work and what needs to happen moving forward. So thank you for this commitment. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Justin. And yes, thanks to all of you. You've done such a nice job. I have to tell you, I was so charged after our last meeting because I just thought you did such a fabulous job that, frankly, I couldn't unwind for the rest of the evening. But it was a good sense of you really have approached the work extremely well, and it's not easy work. So it's a real credit to you, and I'm looking forward to another great meeting today. So with that, I'd like for you to see if you can give us some feedback around the primary considerations draft that we sent out. Aaron sent out an email yesterday that had this as an attachment. And what this is my probably imperfect attempt to capture the ideas that you shared last week. And what I did is Pam and I took a record of all of the things that the group reporters shared from their discussions in their breakout rooms. And we listed them. And as you recall, on the fly last week, I made an attempt to categorize those into some bins or big ideas. And then what I've done here is create a document on the basis of those bins. I had left one off in my original conversation with you. And then when I was looking at the feedback, it was a really major oversight because I know that the best possible learning outcomes is one that's important to all of us. And we had not categorized that as a specific idea. It ran through several threads, but I just thought it would be remiss if we didn't capture that as one of the things that you deeply value. So I put them into 6 categories now. And then what I did is I took those comments that we took notes on, and this is my grouping, and it may be different from the way that you look at it, but I tried to put all of them into one of the categories, acknowledging that some of them fit in more than one category, but I just made a choice about it. But the general idea is to see if the most important part is whether these capture our highest values in what we're trying to accomplish with the work of this committee, and to take any feedback that you have at this point about maybe things that need to be adjusted, how I need to capture ideas in a little different way, perhaps, or even if you think on further consideration, I'm off. I'm just a little bit off on this. So what I'd like to do is just invite, we're going to take a little bit of time here and invite just open commentary, any thoughts that you have. And then I will take that feedback and do another draft of this that will get out to you before the next meeting. And at that point, I'm going to ask us to settle in and try and finalize a commitment to our guiding principles. Otherwise, it's going to be impossible for us to make a recommendation to the board in the time frame that we have. Yes, thanks, Sherry. Is it Sherry or Sherry?
Sherry.
Yeah.
For me, I think that the thing that perhaps is not captured, even though there's a lot of writing there, is the safety aspect of everything. My main goal is going to be to keep people alive. And Snohomish County is not doing well right now. In fact, there's talk of moving back a phase.
Oh.
And I think that we need to take this more seriously. I sincerely do not want teachers, other staff, administrators, and particularly students going back into an environment that is not completely safe and that we can guarantee that they will not end up in hospitals.
Thank you very much. Any other comments?
Spencer?
Yes.
Yeah, Mike Birch here from Transportation.
Thanks, Mike.
Really, looking through this, my biggest concern is really communication to find out which students are going to require transportation. Currently, we have it's kind of an opt-out model where we route every student in the district to begin the year, knowing that there's going to be a large percentage that don't require transportation. We really need to go to an opt-in, especially with the guidance we're getting from OSPI, where we want to encourage families to transport their own students or encourage more walking and biking. And then with the latest guidance on the frequently asked questions of the capacity on a bus is really open-ended, and we want to limit that capacity. But the only way to do that is really get an accurate number of students that are going to require transportation at the very beginning of the year instead of cleaning it up as we go for the first couple months.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Janelle, I think you had your hand up as well.
I did. I just had a question. If someone has a comment, how do we get more information from them regarding a comment? Do we just do it in a big group or privately? How is that set up?
Well, I think in this setting, when we have the whole group together, it's absolutely fine for you to ask in this group.
Okay. Well, I was curious when we were talking about the safety. Sherry, was curious what's not on this safety, physical, and social, emotional that when you commented, we are talking about the 6-box deal, right? And what isn't in that safety box that you were worried about?
Okay, well, there's a lot of considerations under that, actually. It probably might get into the weeds, but like even when you talk transportation, how many of the people that are scheduled to transport children are in high-risk groups? How many of our staff members are in high-risk groups? How many of our students are in high-risk groups? What phase are we going to be in September when we're scheduled to go back to school? I mean, there's so many considerations around health, and our numbers are going up. And if you listen to Dr. Fauci, he is saying we could possibly end up with 100,000 people sick a day.
Right, and I agree that we also heard that. And but what I'm hearing you say is your concern is mostly with the high risk groups, and probably, am I correct, these are at the 10,000 foot level now, and as we get farther, we'll be drilling down, but not necessarily right now because she has a valid concern. We have a lot of high risk people, and that's when that'll take place, is a little bit further down the road here.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so any safety issue should be in this box now. I added your high risk group part for later, but okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I got that.
No,
Appreciate that.
I appreciate your follow-up.
And just to follow on to her concern, my understanding is that we're going to be looking at multiple options along a continuum so that if, for example, Snohomish County does go back to stage 1, then we have an option that's ready to go. We're not necessarily saying, oh, well, we prepared for in-person, so we're going in person. We're preparing options along the continuum so that if from a safety perspective, in-person isn't something we can facilitate, then we have the other options ready to go. Did I get that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And you know, it's just my advice to everybody as well, to think of it that way. We want to plan for the worst case scenario first, because it's easier to go back the other direction, right? You know.
So once you get the models established, also would that be where there might be something on the school website for like the opt-in, like Mr. Birch was talking about, so parents could literally go there and opt in for transportation so that they could know what they're going to have?
Correct. Those are the kinds of things that we'll want to get to as we proceed into the finer detail. You know, that's an example, by the way, of people won't respond to that survey until they know what the plan is. And so there is a I don't know if catch-22 is the right metaphor for it, but that's why we have to stay in an appropriate trajectory of going from broad to specific, because that information will be less valid if we ask people to make responses about things that they're not sure they have clarity about what it's going to look like. I kind of mangled that sentence, but you get the gist. Thank you. Any other comments? Just so I'm hearing loud and clear this idea that safety, while we have it as one of 6, I'm hearing commentary around the importance of it, perhaps, and we'll get to this the next time we have the conversation, so it's good you're bringing it up. We'll be asking about this next time. If we were to rank order them, what's number 1? Because some of them are in tension with each other, right? And we're going to have the first one identified as the first one, that all the rest of them have to fall behind. Deanne, did I see your hand up?
Yes. Under the best possible learning experience, I would like to maybe see something in there about being able to provide for continuous learning.
Tell me more about what you're meaning, just so I make sure I get it in the document.
So for our students, if we are face-to-face, but we have to close school for a time, reopen again, one school closes, just to be able to provide for that continuous learning for students, so that that change in their status at school doesn't affect their schooling and their education.
Wonderful suggestion. Thank you. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Well, those are very helpful suggestions, and I will bring those into the document. And it'll be nice for us. We have a week next week when we're not, oh, I apologize. That's what happens when I have the phone too close to the computer, sorry. We will have that conversation about finalizing these next time together. And it's going to be nice to have the week of a little bit of a pause from the actual meeting to continue to do some reflection around that. So thank you again, and I appreciate your commentary. We're going to move now into the heart of the matter. And what we're going to do, as you've seen on your notes, is that Kim Whitworth is going to outline for us some broad alternatives that have been discussed at the district by district core team, work team. And she's going to make those presentations to you and share with you, you know, kind of where the district core team is with regard to these ideas. And then we're going to get into breakout teams for quite a significant time, so that you have an opportunity in small groups to look at those options and to then identify for each of those options, first, a general evaluation of how the proposal meets our primary considerations in their tentative form as they are, what the pros are for the option, what the cons are, things that would have to be considered to implement it, right? That's very important for us. And then questions that you'll have about the proposal. And so then we'll have a whole group time together where we'll hear those report outs from the committees. And then Justin and Kim will do a little debrief with you about what they heard from your commentaries, your questions, what things are rattling around in their heads on the basis of the commentary that you've given. So this is where we really start getting into the thick of it. And as I said at the start, I'm really excited about that. This is what we're all here for. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim.
Thank you, Spencer. Good afternoon, everybody. Have you had a chance to look at this yet? Has this been sent to you? The options have not been sent? Okay.
I didn't send it out yet because I wanted you to deliver kind of the framing of the message first, and then I'll send it as soon as you do that. Or I can send it right now.
You know what? Maybe go ahead and send it now. I'm also going to do a screen here. I think that will help a little bit if I can, and I can. Thank you, Keith. So we sat down with central office people, district office people, and came up with as many options as we could. It was just like, no idea is a bad idea. And we ended up coming up with 5 that we thought we could probably deliver. So we took those to our school leaders with the charge of helping us to identify what are the options that we think we can do well. There were some options in there that were really creative. They're just, you know, that were really specific about some things, and we just weren't sure that we would be able to do them as well as we wanted to. So this is a briefing paper, and it's the first paragraph just kind of gives us some background on where we're at, which I think everybody knows where we're at. These 4 little bulleted points right here are really important for us all to remember. And I'm also going to just reiterate what Heather Young said. We know that we have on one end of this continuum, everybody back in school full-time, just as we've always done it. And then on the other end, we have continuous learning 2.0, which means we're all at home and we're learning from home, distance learning, and that's where we are. What we're trying to identify is what does that learning model right in the middle look like? And then I also appreciated what Deanne said about the transition from those, and we've kind of already started talking about that a bit. But these 4 things are important to keep in mind. Depending on the decision to allow districts to count students who engage in only online distance learning, we're going to be able to add the option that if anybody chooses to learn exclusively by distance learning, we're going to provide that opportunity. These options are also subject to our collective bargaining And we said this earlier, that we want to make sure that we're respecting our collective bargaining agreements. In-person learning may not be for the whole day. So when we're looking at this, what we want to really focus on, for example, will be elementary students in school to learn reading, math, social emotional learning, structured play, and then continuing to learn social studies, science, art, music, etc. online. And this might also look a little bit different at the secondary as well. So when we say kids are in school 2 days a week or 3 days a week, it's not necessarily that they'll start at 7:40 and end at 2:20. It's still going to be a little bit different there. The other thing that we're acutely aware of is just space, and even repurposing spaces that are not traditional classrooms is not going to necessarily give us all of the room that we need for the social distancing. So that's something that we're going through now, is looking at our cafeterias and our gyms and the PAC at the high school and some other areas, and trying to figure out how we can maybe divide those up a little bit more and provide more learning spaces. Option A is probably the most, traditional, outside of traditional schooling that we have. And basically what it is it's 2 days in person of learning and 3 days of distance learning. So we would split families up into 2 groups, and we would do it by household. And the idea behind that is that if a family has a kiddo at a middle school and a high school and an elementary, they're all in school at the same time, so that parents aren't trying to figure out Monday is the middle school, Tuesday's my high school kid. This would provide some consistency there. We're having some conversations about, is that, for let's just for one of the groups of kids, is that a Monday and Thursday and the second group is Tuesday, Friday? Or is it Monday, Tuesday for one group and Thursday, Friday for the other group? And then having one day, and I think we identified Wednesday here, is a time for teachers to collaborate, for teachers to plan, for teachers to deliver services for students who definitely need more time. Maybe it has to do with IEP. It could be that it's for our ELL students or for interventions. But this is option A, and you can go through and read all of the things that we wrote with the pros and the challenges here. There are 2 option Bs. It's kind of like option B1 and option B2. And this has to do with identifying a group of students who we want to have in school 4 days a week. The first one is, depending on enrollment, having our kindergarten through 2nd grade students in school 4 days a week, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. That's, that can be determined. But the reason we started here was we want to make sure that all of those foundational skills that kids are learning in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, math fluency, and all of those early learning, reading foundational skills, we want to make sure that they have that. This is also the group of kids that we know probably struggle a little bit more with distance learning. We know that teaching kids to read through, computers and distance learning and packets is not an optimum environment for learning that really important skill. B2 is a little bit different. It's the same theme, but what we were thinking of is opening up the Wagner Center to hold all of our kindergarten students. And that way we can have, the kindergarten students are in that room, and it opens up some space in our other schools to where we might be able to work, be a little more flexible with our learning spaces there. The one thing that might be an issue with this, or actually not might be, it is that we couldn't get all of our kindergarten students in that space. So we're thinking about, it might be a solution to that we identified was to have the 5th graders go to Hidden River. And because the proximity between the 2 schools is really close, then we can work on transitioning our 5th graders a little bit earlier, and we could have the Maltby staff working with the Hidden River staff, and it provides some opportunities there for getting kids ready for middle school. So again, with each of these options, there's a pros and a benefit and a challenges and costs, and we definitely welcome feedback on all of that and additions to those 2 columns for things that we might have missed, because probably happened. Spencer, with that, I don't know if you want to do clarifying questions or you want to just go ahead and put people in groups. And for those that you talking really fast, here's option B2.
Personally, if we're supposed to discuss this information and it's not on the reopening website, are you emailing it to us before we get in those rooms? Everything you said to me, I'm sorry, it was just like everything. And it's going to be hard to discuss this without having something in front of us.
Yep, I emailed it to you right before Kim started talking. So it should be in your
Pardon?
email. Yep, it should be in your email box right now.
Oh, thank you, Erin. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate it.
So Spencer, I don't know, do we want to give people just a couple of minutes to go through that? I think mostly just reading the options and then the pros and the challenges, and then see if there's clarifying questions before we go off into.
Spencer, you're muted.
It's probably better that way. Yes, that's a great idea. Take about 2 or 3 minutes, look at those options, and then we'll see if there are any big general questions. This is where I don't want us to get into the weeds, but if there are questions about what is meant by something in the document, we will look at those, because the main thing we want you to do is have lots of time to talk in small groups about issues or concerns or how you feel about them. So about a minute here.
Hey, Kim, can I ask a quick clarifying question about option B1, the 4th bullet down? It says English language learners, title learning assistance program. Was there more to that sentence?
Yes. And now I'm trying to remember if what we had here was that this was kind of what would happen on. Yeah. Yes, and I'm so sorry. If you go to the B2,
I wonder if you meant for it to be the same bullet point that's for secondary.
yes.
That's correct. That one would be English language learners, title, learning assistant programs, resource students, intervention groups on Wednesdays.
Wednesday.
I think that was my mistake. I was copying and pasting that into each of them, and I didn't fully copy and paste that one. So,
David, if you're going to take the fall for this one, I'll take the next one.
that's the least I could do.
Thanks for clarifying.
Are there other clarifying questions, or just very big picture? Again, we're not getting into the conversation about these, just something you need information on before you go into your breakout session.
The clarifying question with Wednesdays as noted, would that mean changing schedules for when there's a holiday on Monday? I just feel like that might come up in all of our groups with that question. How would we address the inequity of the Monday group not having as many days?
Yeah, and that was a great piece of feedback from the principal corps. And I think you identified, aren't there like 7 Mondays or something, 8 Mondays throughout the year where there's a holiday? And I think we would need to consider that is maybe Monday the day that we don't have kids in, Or do we say on the days where Monday is a holiday, then Wednesday's a school day? And I think we can talk with, get feedback from you and get feedback from any surveys on how that would work in terms of just continuity and what you're depending on happening. Thank you, Stephanie.
I believe on the equity piece, so long as whoever's coming Monday is not also coming Tuesday, it's 7 of one, 8 of the other that we miss. And so throughout the course of the year, our Monday and Friday kids should have the same number of school days.
Thank you. Anyone else have a clarifying question before going into breakout rooms?
I do real fast. Since Friday is the day we normally get out early, is that being replaced? So that would go into the Wednesday day or whatever filler day?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. Good question, Kaylee.
Yeah, I think just to follow up on Kaylee's question, I think that what we've seen from a couple of early shows from other districts is really taking a look at the time that students are in. So I think that's another thing that I would just offer out as far as thinking about these models, is that that's not necessarily the full day model for kids. It could be a modified day for our students as well. There's some districts that have determined that, for example, specialists are going to be virtual. And especially around the singing piece, that's something that hasn't really been solved yet. I don't know if you're geeking out as much as I am on all of this reopening school stuff, but there's a lot of tension around singing. And for those of us, when people ask me where I live, I say, when you're watching the Doppler radar, that green spot where the convergence zone is, that's where we live in Monroe. And so the idea of having music outside, which is one of the solutions that they've offered us, I honestly don't know how that would work for a significant portion of the days that we have here in Monroe. So that's something that is not, that's just, I think, like to Spencer's 10,000 foot, but I think the timing of the day is something that's definitely something that I would consider not fixed yet. Obviously, we have that defined in our contracts with our people, with our different groups, but that's something that we would need to examine and have conversations about, again, underneath our commitments and our primary considerations is that something that we need to take a look at as well? Do we need to look at the timing that students are in school, and then what would we want to refine the focus of that time as well?
Good. And we probably have time for one last clarifier, and if there is one, and if there is not, we're good too.
Are you accounting for transitions on your special needs, David? Did I miss that?
Sorry, what do you mean by transition? Or 18 to 21
we call them transitions now, but the
18 to 21-year-old program?
Yes.
Yes, I believe we would have thought through that completely, but I think we would consider them because they would be in a similar population as like our structured learning center programs.
Okay, and they're on the list. Did I just overlook them?
They were not on the list. The structured learning centers were.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And are you counting the pre-K in like the SLCs as well?
Yes, the preschools would be going their typical 4-day schedule.
Okay, so thank you very much, all. And what we're going to do now is to get placed in breakout rooms. And please establish who's going to be the reporter out from your breakout room. We're going to be in breakout rooms for 50 minutes or 55 minutes. Let's go with 50. I want to give you enough time to really have conversations and really think about what we're asking on the agenda document. You know, pros, cons, your initial feelings about how it meets our tentative primary considerations, and what it would take to implement it. You know, this is where we start getting into getting your help to brainstorm some of the more detailed pieces of this. What would we need to know in order to pull this off? And some questions that you have that can move us more towards the specific questions, because that's how we're going to be able to then be able to respond to you in the next meeting with bringing back some more finer grained details. Okay, so find a breakout room reporter and have yourselves a really good conversation, and we'll see you back in 50 minutes.
So just to confirm, Spencer, that's 50 minutes, and I'm getting ready to send everybody to the breakout rooms. Here we go, folks.
Thank you. Oh, that was smooth.
Yeah, so I learned some lessons from last time. So for some reason, my friend Greg here just doesn't seem to want to join the right group. Oh, there he went. He didn't click the button.
I was going to make some. We told you 50 minutes, and then I made a decision to make it 40 because we weren't going to have enough time to do some processing. And so hopefully that did not blow up your conversations. But since we are short on time, I would like to invite folks to just start sharing from group reporters, just the main things that came up in your group. Try to be, I mean, this is the tension, try to be brief and tell us what we need to know. So just thank you, Heather.
Always happy to volunteer.
Thank you.
With much love and respect, we would suggest that having additional time to read, digest, and really get familiar with the contents prior to planned discussions would be super helpful in the future. Given that one of the primary considerations that we talked about was safety, what wasn't clear to us in reading these options was how the simply implications for each plans are being incorporated, or how they differ between the different options. So is there a plan that's safer than the other, or is there one that has higher safety costs, et cetera? So that felt like that data was missing for us. Additionally, another primary consideration highlighted the focus on equity and closing opportunity gaps. And so what we were wondering whether splitting by grade and age was the best way to meet that, or if there's a better way for us to serve those who need to be in person more. You know, those in the SLC setting were highlighted as one group that would need to be in person more. But what about those experiencing homelessness, or those who are in transition, or, you know, are there other lenses that we should be looking at to really help close equity gaps and focus on some of those priority areas? But while also, how do you do that while also maintaining appropriate confidentiality? The intervention times being one time a week on Wednesdays is not going to be sufficient. So it's not clear yet whether or not there would be sufficient time on other days, depending upon how long the school day is. So if the students are in class for 4 hours, does that leave some additional time on other days for interventions? Because doing it once a week with students is just, that's not nearly going to be enough. The plan to bring tech back and forth, yikes. Hope you have a big tech budget. That's all I'm gonna say about that. Splitting days so that it's either like Monday and Thursday or Tuesday and Friday or whatever is harder, we think, on families than doing Monday, Tuesday back to back or Thursday, Friday back to back. But better still would be doing A weeks and B weeks, so that so that a given student would be in for the week for 4 days and then home for the next week. So instead of flip-flopping back and forth within the same week, you have a week on, a week off. We also think that that would probably lower your cleaning costs, because you wouldn't have to do the deep cleanings every single night, because you'd have the same group of students in that classroom for the week instead of changing out every other day. So you could do just the regular cleanings on the daily and then do the deeper cleanings at the end of the week. Another question or idea was, instead of having the students pass in between times, if you kept that group of students in the classroom and had the teachers pass, then once again, you're limiting the transitions in the hallway and you're potentially lowering cleaning costs and time and that sort of thing. Where were we? It mentions in B1 that there's increased caseloads for grades 3 through 5. What would that look like and from what to what? If you have families that are opting for continuous learning, so online only, are those students going to be part of their kind of regular classes, or are those going to be in a virtual only class so that there's a teacher that is focused on virtual only, rather than there being a teacher who is teaching in person sometimes and some kids only online, and having to juggle kind of different groups within a single class. It wasn't clear what the PPE cost number was. Is that for staff? Is that for students? Is that for equipment? Is that for cleaning? Is that everything? Is that some subset of that? Just some additional background on that, so we understand, again, from a safety perspective, what's already been baked in. The state plan talks about school nurses, or talks about there being kind of a COVID lead at each school, but since we don't have full-time student nurses at each school, who would that COVID lead be and what would that look like? And what are our plans for students who have tummy aches versus students who have fevers in, you know, if they are in person and if there isn't a student, if there isn't a nurse. The American Academy of Pediatrics has put out recommendations around school and around PPE and around masks and all that kind of stuff. And it seems like it's not in a 100% alignment with the Department of Health in the state of Washington. And so are we looking at that? How are we reconciling the differences?
Yeah. I'm going to jump in on that one. That's an important point. And the American Academy of Pediatricians is really an important organization, and obviously first-class scientists. And there is a disagreement around that. However, we must follow the state's guidelines. So that conversation will take place between, that'll be a decision of the state's Department of Health. No school district in the state of Washington has an option to buck the Department of Health. So it's a fair point. It's a good point. I'm glad that that information is out there now, because there's clearly going to be some conversations around that. But I just want to jump in. I've been talking to superintendents all over the state this week, and there's a letter out from the Attorney General saying those guidelines have the effect of law. Mm-hmm. And so the Department of Health has to make the call on that. I'm just going to, Heather, just in the interest of time, are there other big picture ideas coming out of your group? I don't want to cut you off, but I also want to keep us.
Yeah, I think we only had a couple more that merit. One was, how will we identify the needs for additional supports or added screening when we're engaged in social distance learning? So for people who have learning delays, who have social and emotional needs, behavioral, whatever that is, identifying those in a continuous learning environment is very different than identifying them in person. And so how are we going to be ensuring that we're meeting those needs and identifying those needs in this different format? who has to figure out childcare for essential workers and others? There was a lot of work that went into that during the spring. And I know that there were community partners that stepped up, but what does that look like once this becomes kind of the new normal? And then the last two, one had to do with a question around additional space in the community. One of the plans talked about using the Wagner building for additional space. Does it make sense to have a conversation about what red tape we might have to cut through to look at whether someone might be interested in donating unused retail space, for example, in Monroe, for temporary use of the school district to give us extra space? Would that be something that would be considered a tax write-off for some real estate person who has a building that's been sitting empty for 2 years? I don't know. If we need space, there's space. It's not ours. Can they loan it? And then lastly, can families who do need additional in-person support for whatever reason, whether it's experiencing homelessness or some special IEP thing, whatever it is, can they be take extra in-person time and cannot be offset by the families that are opting for 100% continuous learning for whatever reason, masks, etc.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Very thoughtful. Niall, did I say that right?
Yeah, you got it. Yep. Thank you. So we had a good conversation. We touched on a lot of the similar things that Heather touched on. So I'm going to just run through them real quick. It felt like kind of building on the Wagner Center that our group didn't feel great about option B2. Wagner Center is currently not outfitted with some of the technology that our other classrooms have with the panels as well as the audio enhancement systems. So that was a concern of those are not necessarily set up. There's also talk in that about kindergarten is a great primary age to introduce students to the school culture and getting them really involved in school. And so if they're separated by themselves, they're not exposed to their older age peers. And then that playground there at Wagner Center is more set up towards older students, not as much set up towards our littles. We had a talk also about technology, and if we are on 2 days a week or 4 days a week, we're going to have a need to have Chromebooks in the classroom as well as at home. And so that's going to be a challenge and a big conversation to go through of how do we make sure those devices are getting transported properly, as well as it's a kind of a big umbrella conversation there, but we would need them in both places. We had just a thought about consistency, and that the Monday, Tuesday, and then a Thursday, Friday would probably work better for families than a Monday, Thursday, and then a Tuesday, Friday for childcare.
Okay. Did you freeze or are you?
Am I back?
You're back.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Where did you guys lose me on that?
Childcare, better for childcare. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Monday, Thursday, and then Tuesday, Friday is harder for childcare. So those 2 back-to-back days is easier. With option B1, I had just a thought around, if we have families that have a kindergartner as well as a 5th grader, with that option B1, we have our kinder through 2nd 4 days a week, and then 3-5 only 2 days a week. And so childcare for that setup would be a pretty major challenge for those families because they have potentially a 4th or 5th grader that doesn't have childcare a couple days a week. And then another topic that came up was being able to provide nutrition for families when we're offering breakfast and lunch. If those kids are not in the buildings, working through that when we also have other students who are in the building at the same time. And then again, the same conversation as what Heather was saying is how do we leverage other spaces that we either have in the district or out of the district to be that portables, or if there's space in the new building or in the current district office, if there's the ability to use any of those as additional classrooms And then similarly, last point here with the interventions, our students who do interventions and have that as an additional resource for their learning currently get those interventions more than once a week. And so if we went to having that model as only one time a week, that isn't providing the time that those students currently have. And so there's an equity lens there, since equity is not equal, but how are we providing additional supports for those students if they need it? And I think that that's pretty much everything from our group that came up.
Great. Thank you very much, Niall.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brett, please. And in the interest of time, I'd like to encourage you all, if you're just adding on to what another group has said, just very briefly on that one. But that makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
ours was secondary group, so I'll keep it brief. We spent the majority of our time really wrestling with, at the high school, we've got eight classes, 8 periods, and how sustainable is that in this model, and do we need to rethink taking that back down and reducing the number of graduate, just go with the minimum in terms of graduation requirements, or maybe the option of kids can do the minimum, or if they want to take the extra and go for that 8, maybe try to do both. But just how viable or how feasible is it to keep that 8 period structure? That was, I think we really need to keep considering that. And I think from a secondary perspective, to me, because both options seem pretty similar from the secondary side of it. The real work, I think, with our staff is going to be thinking about flipping the mental model for instruction. So really taking the remote time to try to deliver the content. That way, when kids are in the building with us, we can be more supportive and helpful and help them with their questions, instead of trying to do that in person and then expecting them to kind of be on their own and get them that support through Zoom. Do it the opposite way, where we're heavy content through the remote piece, which and if we could commit to that type of approach, I mean, you don't need 8 algebra teachers delivering 8 algebra, the same exact lessons. Like, one of them could literally deliver one lesson for all the classes, which I think would be a load off of those teachers, and they could rotate that, depending on the week. So there's a lot of opportunity there, but really thinking about flipping the instructional approach in this model.
Thank you very, very much. Yes, please. Vic.
Okay. I'll just add on to what's already been said. We'll start with option B. We thought it was intriguing to have all the kindergartners in one building and at the same place and at the same time. And I think that might have been brought up in one of the other things by having all the kids together. What does it look like for kindergartners to go to school 4 days a week and maintaining the continuity for kids? Questions that came up in our group. Under option B1, it captured all the kids at their stage of development, and it allowed them to attend more face-to-face based on their independence level. One of our wonders was with the caseload for 3rd through 6th grade, it was hard to meet the requirements with the cap size of students in classrooms. Our challenge was staffing for all the models. How are we going to staff them? Endorsements, teachers are teachers under the new model, but that's still a wonder. How do we make sure that people are in the right place to teach and learn? Considerations, we're looking at staffing. Once we get the true amount of kids, how do we know who's really coming back versus going to choose online learning in order to get kids and people in the right buildings? Let's see. Looking at the flexibility of, let's say a family only has 1 student in the district versus more than one, that flexibility of where we can move them around versus putting them in their home school. Under the first one, option 1, the challenge would be is a reality of having all the kids come face to face, and what about the ones that are online? Maybe a little had to do with daycare, a little has to do with teaching and learning. What do we do with those kids when they're not with us? What are the ones that are with us? And I think Brett brought up the good point of, maybe we do the content online, and then when they come back, they get the face-to-face, those kind of things like that. How do we impact all the kids at all ends of the spectrum? You know, not just our special ed kids, but our students, you know, who need the academic challenge. What are we doing with those kids? Looking at maybe our high needs kids coming to school all 4 days during the week versus just on the 2 and off 2 and back on 1, if we can make that happen. And just keep in mind at all times that younger students need more time with their teachers and face-to-face. But overall, we thought the first one provided equal access to all, but careful consideration to making it equitable for all.
Very good. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Go with Jason here.
Thanks. So I think the proposal meets the primary consideration list quite well. It touches on everything pretty much except community communications. As far as things to be considered to implement, technology equity, just touching on that again really quickly. Are there perhaps some corporate grants available from local? We have a lot of technology companies in the area. Are there perhaps any grants from those companies? I've got a great public schools foundation. Perhaps donations can be set up from the local community through them for tax deductible donations. Quality of instruction, we need to do more than provide online access for X number of hours, days, and minutes. The quality needs to be good enough to ensure that there isn't a gap in learning between person and online. As far as the two options, A and B, A seems easier at first glance for a multi-child and grade family to manage as far as schedules are concerned. But if option B was implemented, we want to ensure that the K-1 students have the same days off as everyone else, so it makes it easier for those families to manage. And then a couple of questions that came up. What is the cutoff going to be for parents to opt in or out to in-person learning? That might help steer what model the district ends up going, whether we end up proposing, as it gives a more firm head count of what to expect in person at each of the schools. And is grading still going to be traditional? Are we going to go with the 11-point grading system? Or are we going to go with something different moving forward? So I think everything else was touched on, so I won't go into any more of our discussion.
Thank you very much. Joseph.
Out of respect for time, I'll try to be brief. I just wanted to say that my group, Brenda, Karen, Seamus, we focus more on that space in between pros and cons. So challenges with all of the models and distance learning. And I'll say that personally, I think the biggest challenge for this group is moving from doing our best in this situation into equity and effectiveness in this situation. And that's there. For that reason, I just want to acknowledge the authors of the options for their thoughtfulness and say, or propose that we play the Mission Impossible music at the start of each meeting here. That would be apropos. I do want to say that in addition to learning equity issues, there are significant economic equity issues as well, especially as parent availability is impacted by economic status when we move into parent-dependent learning. So a brief overview in no particular order, and I will be brief. We saw that there was great opportunity here with any 2.0 learning model to develop independent learners, especially early, and that within that opportunity, we don't want to overlook the potential to teach our K through 2 learners how to be successful learners within this model. We don't want to overlook that. So yes, there needs to be a focus on reading and math, but yes, we need to teach kids how to be good learners if this is what the future looks like moving forward. And we don't know how long we'll be moving forward. This will be. We know that there needs to be flexibility given to our educators in terms of helping to determine or discern how well this traditional brick and mortar curriculum translates to online delivery, because it doesn't all translate well into online delivery, especially when we're considering the importance of scope and sequence and this interrupted model, whether it's 2 days or 4 days of learning per week. Want to acknowledge that both options require significant parent investment, and that even where we have a model requiring significant parent investment at Sky Valley, even they don't experience that at the levels that are required to make every student successful. And the more dependent learning becomes on adult content delivery, the less equity there will be, especially when it's parents who are delivering that content. So we just need to look at curriculum flexibility. We need to be consistently asking ourselves or helping our teachers to identify the answer to what content can I support the parents delivering at home versus what content must I deliver. And Brett, loved your comments. Let me scan through here really quick. Again, in any instance where we are depending on parents to deliver any content or learning, we are moving into something that's inherently inequitable, where those who are marginalized or behind will see a widening gap between those who have. So just something to be mindful of. And to that end, really need to explore online options like Starfall, Khan Academy, others that can help parents to deliver or to teach without needing them to teach. So there's lots of free online learning resources available, and we may need to work with tech to expand that list. Let me see if there's anything else. The one other thing, and this is touching on Heather and Brett and others, we really need to look beyond just identified special needs populations into identified high-risk populations in order to offer or even mandate an in-person learning option for those who chose not to participate for whatever reason this year. We only expect that to grow. So appreciate all of the thought. There are significant challenges, and I know we're going to pick the best option. So we're in that space of caution.
Thank you very much. Anna.
So I won't repeat things. Our group was an elementary primarily group, so we kind of were looking at it from that lens. And I know we're not exactly voting, but at the end of the day, we really appreciated the idea of maximizing face-to-face time for as many kids as possible, especially the younger students. And so we saw in B1 a lot of opportunity for that, and then wondering about hybriding B1 and B2 if we needed the space so that really as many kids as possible could come back face to face. We also came up with a number of questions kind of for any model. One was just in our conversations, we felt pretty strongly as a group that Mondays as the off day or non-in-person day would be most beneficial. When looking at the calendar, we could only think of one Friday that was an off day, and we felt that it would be easier for childcare and setting up the week for kids and the holiday issue if we shifted that day to Mondays. And additionally, that consecutive options for the AB in terms of a Tuesday, Wednesday group and a Thursday, Friday group would also make it easier for parents who are looking for childcare with that Monday as the off day. Additionally, the question of classified contracts came up, and if we're moving to a 4-day model with kids, what are we doing to support our classified staff who are counting on kind of 5-day-a-week contracts? So we talked a little bit about, you know, the food challenge that we faced this year and creatively solved around bus routes and getting food to kids using our classified staff, and thinking, you know, we will need to do that in next year as well. So perhaps using our classified staff, but just something to remember and keep in mind. And then with the B1 option, while we said getting kids back face-to-face is really important, we like that, we also wanted to just raise the awareness of families that have same age students or who may have different needs. So if you have students who are in gen ed and students who receive special education services and the same age kids are going different amounts of days, how do we language that? How do we be aware of family situations? That kind of thing. And then just with the B2 option, we raised the question of staggered start times so that families, and really kind of with any option, but if we're encouraging families to drive kids to school instead of take the bus, can we stagger start time so it's easier for families to do that successfully?
Great. Thank you very much. Todd.
So lots already been said, obviously. So just we'll cut to the chase. We just think that B is a really good start towards achieving the primary considerations, and A is really a non-starter. A does not meet equity, the best possible learning for each student, or the flexibility pieces, which are really, half of the primary considerations. So we think we really need to really focus more on B. It's a great start, but there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. In order to take on that work, we think we need to look at revamping strategically this committee and maybe have subcommittees that are focused on the grade levels. So like maybe a K through 3 subcommittee, 4 or 5 subcommittee, 6 through 8, and then 9 through 12, because the needs are so different. And we can only impact certain areas that like Brett had mentioned, he's really already focused on what the high school experience is. Let's intentionally focus it that way and have one committee that's really looking at the high school experience and then on down the line. And with that, some considerations to incorporate. One is, what about K through 3 doing a half-day model every day or 4 days a week? We used to do it for kindergarten. Why not look at doing it for more? Could that help in terms of transportation and distancing within those transportation models to get kids to and from school, and also potentially with some cost savings and with the space in the buildings, and then more flexibility on how to provide interventions for students that aren't necessarily part of an existing special needs category. We need to make sure that any student with a need, we should be prepared to meet it. And so we need to further investigate that flexibility and how we can provide that in option B. We didn't really discern specifically whether B1 or B2 was better, but we think we need to do a deeper dive.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you very much. Let's see, do we have other folks to hear from? Is that Amanda?
Yep. So I'll be super quick. Just from a facilities standpoint on B2, Devlin made a good point about the constructability costs of making the Wagner building functional for small children. Modifications even in the physical building, like toilets and bathrooms, could become super costly. So maybe thinking about utilizing that building for older students to keep the cost of making it functional down. There was also a little bit of concern about the noted new 14 custodians and what happens when somebody calls in sick and there's no sub pool for that. Likewise for educators, a little bit of a lack of the sub pool to make up for potential illnesses. But aside from that, I know we're short on time and we were pretty much in agreement with what everybody else said.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And Robin?
Yep. We're split between options A and B1. I'm going to cut my video so that my audio stays stable. With A, I'm just going to zip through these. Team, if I miss anything, please just feel free to pipe in. With A, we have a question around how we'll sort families into A and B groups. With devices, we really wanted kids to be able to have a device at school too, but how will they transport those? I know another group mentioned that. But we do feel it's important that we need to have instruction with devices in the classroom because we didn't have that opportunity during this unexpected break from in-building learning. Let's see. We do have a concern with option A, how teachers will manage in-class instruction and online instruction at the same time. Possibly shorter days would be best for in-person learning, and then giving teachers the ability to respond to emails after hours. How do we protect student privacy? Students who are in categorical programs, if they're having to attend on Wednesdays, we were concerned about that. Just maybe
somehow we need to protect their privacy around that, their services that they're getting on that day, work that in somehow. Let's see, there was a lot crammed in on Wednesdays on that option A though, and we're worried, we're not sure how it's all gonna get fit in. And then we had a parent concern in our last group that we're worried about staff who are expected to work a full week, but yet their students, their student children who are only attending in person 2 days a week. What can be done to alleviate childcare expenses? Hopefully that can be part of the conversation going forward. With B1, we like the consistency for our early learners. We're just worried if we have enough physical space for that. And let's see, if we're moving some of our 3rd through 5th staff around to cover kindergarten, do we have enough space for physical distancing if we do that? And then with option B2, we had concerns with mixing 5th graders at Hidden River with the older kids, and then the transportation challenges. And also the expense for moving, getting kinders into Wagner Center. Have I missed anything, team?
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank
you very much. Is there anyone else? Okay, well, you have shared a lot of fabulous information and wonderful ideas. And I apologize that we're going to run a little over. And I am very sorry about that, but I also want to make certain that we have an opportunity to do an appropriate closure today. And so I'm going to ask Justin and Kim to see if in 2 or 3 minutes or less, you can just acknowledge what you've heard and thoughts about going forward, but really brief.
Trying to see Kim on the screen. I heard a lot of different comments that specifically landed within the primary considerations, whether that was considerations for family and consistency with family, scheduling concerns for family, daycare concerns for family. One concern that was brought up that I hadn't thought of yet was consistency of meals and nutrition, and that was a huge thing in our initial, this last couple of months that we've been serving children. That was a new thing for me. Community partnerships around technology is a big piece for us. We heard that consistently. How do we ensure that kids have access to our students have access to things at school, devices at school and at home in a continuous learning model. And within the flexibility piece, and then a lot of pieces on physical safety and concerns around physical safety. One thing that I will share with you today is that Brenda Hunt, our Chief Financial Officer, met or had a business item with the school board last night and built in a contingency of $2 million for us at this point in the budgeting process. A lot of times in a budget process, you call that a wild guess about just what we think could be the initial cost to us. You've seen the numbers from Seattle. Spencer, I want to say it was like 12.5 million is what their anticipated cost was, about 70,000 kids. So if you think of that with our 6,500 kids, but I heard things land in each of those categories.
Yeah. Good.
So I have 3 big things that just keep banging around in my head from listening to all of this. One is I'm not sure that we're using an equity lens as much as we're using an equal services lens. I think we need to put our equity lens back on again and rethink some of these things. The decrease in transitions really hit home, whether it's, Monday, Tuesday, or whether it's a weekly for a number of reasons, childcare, just some kind of larger routine without all the transitions in between. or technology having to go back and forth. If a kid only has to take a computer to school and bring it home one time a week or every 2 weeks, that's probably going to be better for our technology that we don't have. The final one is, if we don't solve the technology piece, it's going to break us. I think the technology, I'm more worried about that than I am any of the other stuff in terms of safety and teaching and all of that. I feel like we're mitigating as much as we can with that. I am worried about the technology piece.
Thank you. So I just want to say to the whole group, way to go, because you have brought up some really important things that are going to help the next stage of this process. And we couldn't have done that without the diversity of your ideas and your really solid thinking. So thank you. That isn't easy. And, also in this environment, I've said this before, it's a little clunky how we get through this. But you're really to be credited. And again, we take the next step now and come back with some ideas that will capture what you've said and hopefully get to a deeper level of refinement. And then you give us some more feedback so that we keep this process moving towards the eventual end of really serving all students. So thank you very much for this. Just to close, I'm going to ask you to do a little poll here. It'll take about 1 minute. This is not binding in any way. It is just to get a first swipe at kind of where your thinking is. It's like a straw poll, the old term that we used to use, just to see if we're in the ballpark on anything. So I'm going to ask Keith in a second to do a poll, and then just want to remind you all, the next meeting, we're back on Thursdays, but we are not meeting next week. We'll be back on Thursday, July 16th. Please go into that online place to do some closing reflections and give us some feedback about the meeting. And again, I want to thank you for your good work today. But I'm going to ask Keith to just put up a little poll. I think there are 4 questions, Keith?
Yes, sir.
And just give us how you're feeling. This is how I'm feeling right now, today at 6:10 on July 1st. It has no binding value, but it's just to give us some feedback.
And responses are anonymous, folks.
Responses are anonymous.
Okay, here we go.
And just let me know, Keith, if we're getting close to where we are on responses.
Yeah, 90%. 90% so far. We've got
Okay.
just a few more people to finish voting.
Okay. And I did not vote, so that that may keep us in that place.
All right, we're at 92%, Spencer. We can give people maybe another 20 seconds, 30 seconds here.
Yeah.
Okay.
20 seconds, and then I'll wrap things up. And if you choose not to vote, you choose not to vote. That's fine.
Okay, that's about 20 seconds. I'm gonna go ahead and end the polling.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. And are you ready for me to share the results?
Yeah, why don't we just see where everybody is right now? Okay, that is very helpful. Everybody get a chance to take a look at that?
This is Kim. Is there any chance we could ask? I mean, maybe it came through. I just would like to know, like, for example, number 2, option B1 with further development. What would we need to do to option B1 to get it to 100%? Can that come out in a survey or something? Feedback?
Yeah, let's try and look at that in the feedback comments. Is that fair for everybody? If you, in the feedback comments, could you respond to that question? What would be things that you would really want to have looked at that would help convince you that B1 is the way to go? What information would you need? And it is okay to say, it is absolutely okay to say, there is nothing that could ever get me to support B1. That is totally an option for you, and you can say why. It's always helpful for us to know the rationale behind that. But I think that'd be a good way to do it. And if you could try and get that feedback to us in the next couple of days, it'd be really helpful to then help the work group move forward on its next iterations of the work here.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, sorry for being so late with it, but in the conversations today, there was a lot regarding childcare. And in Monroe, I know sometimes people put their kids in where they're close to home, so that would be different. But in Monroe, there's all different sizes of childcare, from just a couple kids to centers and all of that. Has there been any thought given to maybe the district pulling in our childcare providers into maybe a couple of sessions, not here, but find out how these choices would impact them and how they would be able to support people with these very child care schedules? I mean, at least talk with them to find out if they're able to do it or set up, or how they could support us, so that would provide, because it's going to be a hand-holding thing between us and child care providers throughout the district, and how they can support us and we can support them in this aspect. And maybe that would give more ease to some people's minds about whatever option we choose, as long as because it seems like they're a huge stakeholder in this, even though they're not. I don't know if we have any here with us online, but they're a huge stakeholder in the community, because they provide that service that people are going to be needing to depend on once all of this, whichever way it takes place, happens. And if we don't know what they're thinking or what they're willing to do, that could blow a hole in anything pretty much that we pick. Just my thought.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. We've got that captured as something to continue to pursue. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your work today. I apologize for going over time, but it was important to hear everybody's share out from the groups. There were a lot of really good ideas and important things for us to consider to go forward. Justin, anything you'd like to say in closing before we depart for yeah.
I would wish everyone just a happy 4th of July, a safe weekend. Have a wonderful time off, or those of you that have started your summers, our teachers and other staff members, have a great time. I know a lot of us are going to rejuvenate and recharge our batteries, and we'll come back and be fresh and ready to continue going. I appreciate the work today. Lot of solid, heavy lifting today, and a lot of great things for us to continue moving forward with. Thank you again.
Thank you. Everyone. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
How are we sending the thoughts about changing the B1? Who are we emailing that to?
Oh, in the closing reflection document, which is online, and
The website. Okay, got it.
No, it's not on the website. I emailed it to you when I emailed you the reopening options document just a little while ago. So there's a link in that email.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Again, thanks, Erin, very much for all the work. Pam, Keith, we couldn't do it without you. Really nice job, everybody. And I hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you later.
Amy, you got your organ. You got your organ now.